All right, so let's go ahead and get started, and people who join us can join and they can just jump in. My name is Krista Danis. I'm the Events and Program Coordinator at the Aurora Public Library. Thanks to those of us who have joined us. We're really excited to introduce Tess Forel. Is that how you pronounce it, right? Forel?
Yeah, Tess Forel.
Wonderful. And she is going to be talking about head-to-toe cosplay and sewing tips. She's been doing cosplay for 7 years. It's a huge hobby of hers, and she is really excited to share her sewing knowledge with us. So also just a quick reminder that we're in the middle of the Cape Con week. So we still have some events left after today. There's the author visit and comic drawing class with author Jarrett Lerner. And then on Saturday, we've got a panel presentation called Not Lost in Translation, How Comics Create Cultural Connections. And that's going to be very exciting too. So please tune into that either on Facebook Live or on Zoom. The link is in our social media and on our website. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tess.
All right, hello everybody. Again, my name is Tess. I have been cosplaying for 7 years, back when, in-person conventions were a thing. So yeah, I'm just gonna go real quickly through various tips and tricks that I've learned over my years of cosplay. This is gonna be more of an overview. I'm not really going to go really in depth with any one thing. But if you have any questions, feel free to pop in a comment. I will do my best to answer them. So we're gonna start with the head, with the wig. You may have noticed I have horns. Fun fact, they're magnetic, and one's attached to my earring. Let's see. So with magnetic attaching things, props, garments to wigs. Yes, this is analog. We tried to figure out how to get a presentation like shared, couldn't figure it out. We're going analog. So if you have a character like CL who has like a hat on the top of his head, or Jester with horns, somebody who has something attached to their wig, it can be kind of hard to figure out how to do that. And one method is with magnets, preferably neodymium magnets, which are what's called a rare earth magnet. And they are just stronger than the regular craft magnets you would find. So if you have, I'm going to demonstrate on this wig here. This is for a character called Igus from a, what the heck just happened to my lighting? From a, okay, I guess my lighting doesn't like the wig. From a, and I just lost my train of thought, from a video game called Persona 3. And so the character has headphones on either side of her head, and just to help keep it sturdy, I'm planning on adding magnets to either side just to leave it in there. And so I can actually show you how my Jester wig works. And that's just gonna hang there. And I'm gonna go briefly egg for a second as I take my wig off, the cardinal sin. And you can see that I glued a piece of fabric to the inside of the wig. And then there's just a magnet glued in there. So this is what you would do if you want to attach something to the side. If you want to attach something to the top, my wig right here has what's called a skin top. If you see that little circle of plastic right here, that is to mimic the hair coming out in a circular pattern. And so you can just, if you have something to attach to the top, you can just glue a magnet there and you'd be all set. However, at the sides, there's no real easy place to glue it. Here, I'll show you in my Igus wig. Once I get all reattached. Easy enough. All right, so with the Igus wig, ignoring that, if you see the side has all these weft openings, and there's no real easy way to glue it. So what we're going to do is we're going to first grab our wig head and then put the wig on backward, or inside out, I guess is the correct term. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to attach fabric scraps. So what we'll need is fabric scraps in a color close to the color of your wig. So I have this like goldish color. And then you could sew it on if you're patient and have time. But let's be honest, if you're a cosplayer, you probably don't have much of either of those. So we just got some hot glue. And so first you want to figure out where you want the magnet to be. So I guess has these side locks kind of things that are at the temple, so about right here. And the headphones are just above that. So I want the headphones to rest right in here. This is where I'm going to put the fabric scrap. And so when I'm attaching the glue, I want to make sure that I'm not attaching it to the wefts here. I want to make sure that I'm attaching it to these strips here. Because if you attach it to the wefts, then there's a possibility of the hot glue getting on the hair fibers themselves. So I'm just going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of glue right there, and then right there. And then just press the fabric. Make sure you're not bunching the wig up like this when you are setting down your fabric, because otherwise it'll change the wig shape, and that's no good. And then we're just going to go little by little, gluing it up. You don't need to go this far. I'm just being extra because that's the only thing I know how to do, be extra. And then while we're letting that sit, we're going to go ahead and do the other side. Same manner, we're going to go making sure we're not getting on the wefts. All right, and we're just going to press it there, making sure, again, that the wefts are not scrunched up. And we're going to peel it back a little bit and continue up. All right. And then once the glue has fully dried, you can go ahead, cut around the glue, and then you have a base to place your neodymium magnets on. I do not have any neodymium magnets right now, so we're just imagining that I am putting on, I'm gluing on a neodymium magnet right there, and that's a yellow pin on yellow, so that's not going to work. Right there.
Hey, Tess, can you say what kind of magnet that is again? I'll type it in the chat.
Neodymium. Here, I have it.
Oh, nice. Okay. Thank you.
I hope this isn't backwards. No problem. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, neodymium magnets are what's called a rare earth magnet. It just means that they're stronger, again, than your average craft magnet. And they are available from Joann's, Hobby Lobby, possibly. I'm pretty sure they should be in like Home Depot and Lowe's as well. Nope, yeah, Home Depot. All right, so that's how you would attach a neodymium magnet to the sides of a regular wig. Now, how about something like a mask at the front of a wig, like Katra, for example? So let me go ahead and grab the reference picture again. So something like Katra, there's no real easy way to achieve that with just magnets. So we are going to use what is called side relief buckles. And you might not know what they're called, but you definitely have seen them before. They're these buckles that you use for backpacks, for helmets, for everything. And so we'll need one of these. This is a 3/8 inch side release buckle. I got about 20 of these from Amazon for like $9. And then you'd need some sort of ribbon. It doesn't really matter the color, but if you do have a choice, I would suggest sticking to a color that is close to the wig that you're using. So I made a quick example, oh boy, right here, of a mask, and I didn't think ahead, and I made it the mask a similar color to the wig, but never fear. I can show you, you can take it off with these side release buckles. And if you look, if you have the mask pattern, you can see my thing breaks down constantly. What I did is I glued the side release buckles to the inside of the mask. And so the way this works is, there it is. You get 2 lengths of ribbon and you loop them through either side of the buckle. And you can either sew it down or you can glue it down, your choice. And then what you're going to do is when you have your pattern, you're going to hold the pattern up to the wig and decide where you want to place the buckles. I suggest putting them sort of up close to the top of the crown of the head because that'll make it sturdier. I was not thinking ahead and I put these towards the bottom, and so it's a little loose at the top. So again, I would suggest sort of having it up here. And then so what you're going to do is you're going to first, I suggest gluing it to the mask portion first because you want to make sure that it's hidden behind the mask. So when you glue the mask portion, you're going to pull the hair out of the way best you can. This is really helpful if you have clips or anything for wig styling. You can go ahead and clip it out of the way. And you can see hidden in there is the other half of the side release buckle. And it's just stitched in there. I did use red thread to try and make it a bit more visible. So that's just 1/2 of the side release buckle. And so what happens is you can just click it together on that side. And then when you position the mask, you can figure out where exactly you want this rest of the ribbon to go, and then you can just pin it down and sew it just like I did here. And then when you let the hair down, the hair will cover the side release buckle. And then you just do the same thing for the other side. Let me find the buckle here. So you would take the full buckle, figure out where exactly you want this other end to go, pin it down, and then sew it, and then you have the mask attached fully. And then you can adjust little bits and bobs here and there. And that is how you would attach different products or different props and garments to different wigs using both magnets and clasps or buckles, whatever they're called. Oh boy. All right. Remember to unplug your hot glue gun when you're done with it. Safety first, kids. All right, so now that we have the head portion covered, we're going to move on to closures. So what do I mean by closures? Closures are how you, close up garments. So I'm going to go through 3 different methods of closure. Those methods being regular zipper, invisible zipper, and buttons, specifically how to make buttonholes with a machine. So we have a couple of examples of characters that you would use different closures for. You have Eris, who has buttons on her dress. You have Axel or anybody from Organization 13 who have those giant zippers. Or someone like Ari, whose KDA outfit I would suggest using invisible zipper for. So we're going to start with what is an invisible zipper? Because when I first started, I had no clue what that was. I still kind of have no clue. So an invisible zipper is, a zipper that's supposed to be invisible. So a regular zipper looks kind of like this. This is the side that faces outside on a zipper, the right side. And so you notice how you see the zipper tines on the right side, and on the back, you don't really see the zippers. Meanwhile, on an invisible zipper, it's the opposite. This is what's considered the right side of the zipper. This is the side that faces the world, and you don't see any zipper tines, while on the inside, you do. And so the method for putting in an invisible zipper is a little bit confusing and can take some practice. One time when I was putting in an invisible zipper late at night, I put it in incorrectly 3 or 4 times before I just stopped, cried a little bit, and took a break. So we're going to be using here. Actually, what I'm going to do, you can't see the muslin on the canvas of my sewing table, so we're just going to put green fabric down so you can see it a bit easier. There we go. All right, so here is our garment pieces. These are just random scraps of muslin I had lying around. And we're going to consider this the right-hand side of the fabric, and this is the left-hand side of the fabric, or of the garment. So these are both what is called the right side. Both of these are going to be facing the outside. And that can be a little bit confusing, but it just means that when we are sewing, this side of the fabric is going to be facing the world. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our invisible zipper and zip it all the way down. And we want to find the outside of the fabric, pardon me, the outside of the zipper. So the part of the zipper that's going to be facing the world, and that would be this side where you don't see the zipper tines. And so what we're going to do is we're going to lay it, the zipper, right side to the right side of the fabric, but not so fast. Normally you'd think that when you're putting in a zipper, you want the right side of the zipper on the right side, on the right piece of the garment, and the left side of the zipper on the left piece of the garment. But now with invisible zippers, this is what's confusing. You want the left half of the zipper on the right part of the garment. And so the reason you're doing this is because the invisible zipper is made to fold over into the seam. So when it folds over, you won't be able to see the zipper. So let me go ahead and pin this real quick, just quick, so I can show you. Let's see. While I'm here, does anybody have any questions about what we have discussed so far? Any need for clarification? If I'm going too fast, go ahead and let me know. All right, I am not seeing any comments. All right. All right, so I just pinned it real quick to mimic sewing because nobody has time to sew it. So we sewed along this edge of the garment, and then that way when we fold it, the zipper is going to be hidden. So the right side is still facing the world. It's just hidden by this seam right here. And then, so we do the same thing for the left side of the fabric. You would put it right against the edge there, and then just sew right along here. So then this edge would get turned out this way. This edge would get turned out this way. And then when you zip the thing together, you wouldn't even be able to see the zipper. So I have a couple examples, or an example of that in real life. So here is the back of a turtleneck. In Canon, the turtlenecks are very close to the neck, and so it's hard to get that without stretching anything out. So you can see this is made with an invisible zipper. Just like that, the zipper is sewn to the very edge of the fabric and then turned under. So that way when it zips up, it's completely hidden. Can barely even see it, especially from a distance. So that is how you would install an invisible zipper. With a regular zipper, you have a couple options. So the first option is what's called the fold over method. So let's say you have like this strip of fabric that you want to use, you want to attach a zipper to. One option is to, when you're cutting out the fabric, to have a bit of extra room at the edge here, another inch or two that you cut out, and then you can just fold under, just like that, and press. And so then all you have to do is take your zipper, unzip it, and simply attach it like so. And then you can just sew along here. And that'd be one method to attach a zipper. It's probably the easiest method, the method I would suggest. However, if you are, if your pattern is a bit too wide for the fabric you have, you might not be able to have this option, which is where I suggest using what is called a facing. A facing is basically an extra rectangle of fabric or extra shape of fabric that you can use to hide the raw edges of the fabric. So right here I have, this is what I would want to attach the zipper to. And then I'm just going to make another rectangle of fabric right here, and that's the same length, and just sew, I did this with white, just sew it along the top there. And then just like the fold over method, you're gonna fold right at the seam line. So from the outside, you can't really tell that there's a seam there, but there definitely is a teeny tiny little bit of one there. And then just like the fold over method, you would unzip the zipper and just sew it, just like that. The final method is using what is called a binding or bias tape method. So you would use this if the edges of the zipper were a different color from the rest of your garment. So actually I have an example here. For Vampire Todoroki, he has this gold binding, excuse me, up and down, but it's hiding a zipper. Oopsies. So I use this binding method to add this gold trim on top of the zipper. And so the way I did that, let's put you back over there, is again, like the other method, you want your rectangle that you want to attach the zipper to. And then just like the facing method, you're going to make another rectangle of fabric and just sew it onto the first garment. And then instead of folding over at the seam line, like the facing method, you're going to have an extra ½ inch or however thick you want, and then fold that over. So you have this rectangle of fabric, and then you can what's called stitch in the ditch right along that seam in there to secure it down if you so choose, or you can just stitch it directly onto the zipper like so. And then you can zip it up, and that's the third method of attaching zippers. Finally, on to buttons. You can use pretty much any method for attaching buttons that you did for attaching zippers. My preference is either the facing or the fold over method. But what I really want to emphasize here is how to make a buttonhole, because that was what I had trouble with when I was first starting this. So the first thing you need is I'm going to be doing this on my machine. So I need my buttonhole presser foot. This looks kind of funky, and the lighting is not liking it. And then you need the button that you're going to use to attach. The button that you're going to use. And so the way this buttonhole works, the buttonhole presser foot works, is you're going to push this bit up until you can fit a button in there. And so you're going to size this clamp thing to the size of your button. And this is just to tell the machine how big to make the buttonhole. And then I'm going to get a better angle on this in a second. So don't worry. Oh, I unplugged it. Right. All right, so let me just move this around real quick. All right. So here, I'm trying to get a good angle. So right now we have the presser foot attached to my machine. I believe, almost. I apologize, this is probably a little confusing. There we go. So we have the presser foot attached to my machine. And then what we're going to do, the way my machine works, is I have this little tab here. And so I'm just going to push that tab down. And so if you can see, there is a divot here that I'm going to make sure this little presser thing is behind. And then we have this little divot there. And so what's going to happen is the machine is going to feel, okay, this is the front, this is the back, and that's going to tell it how big to make the presser foot, or to make the buttonhole. And then we're going to use one of the buttonhole stitches. Mine are 890. There are differences between these 3 different types, but I don't know what they are. So I'm just going to choose one and then show you how to go. So you would want to choose a presser foot, and then you want to, when making the buttonhole, you want to start at the far end. So we're going to start at one end, all right. And then I have what's called a one-step buttonhole. So I literally just hold down the presser foot. I don't need to hold anything while my machine does all the work for me. All right. And then I would just take it out. Probably should have done this in a darker thread so you could see a bit easier. But now we have a pretty good buttonhole. It's not perfect. We are missing a bit of an edge there, and that is why I definitely suggest practicing on scrap fabric multiple times before you actually make the real cut or make the real stitches, because machines are very fickle. But then what we would do from here is we'd grab a pair of scissors that I totally have right next to me, and then you would just, I fold it in half and then just make a tiny, tiny little cut. We want to make really sure that we are not cutting any of the threads here. Here, I'll do it from this end. Any of the threads here. And we want to get as close as possible to the edges. So I'm just going to trim, trim, trim. Trim, trim, trim. And so now we have the buttonhole right there. We can take our button from here and just pass it through as a test, and it works perfectly. And most machines have this one-step buttonholes. I don't think I know any machine, even my mom's old machine has one-step buttonholes. So as long as you have a buttonhole presser foot, then you should be good for making buttonholes. There are methods of doing it by hand, but I don't have much experience doing it by hand, so I would be unable to help you with that. Best I know, you make the slit first and then just stitch around that opening. But that is a little bit beyond my area of expertise. All right, that is all for closures. Now we're moving on to the skirt portion. So we're going to be talking about pleated skirts, the basic necessity of any cosplay closet. I only have 2. This one is one I made myself for Academy Diva, and this is one I bought off Amazon. There are different kinds of pleats that you can use. You can use a box pleat or a knife pleat. So a box pleat is like this, where there are two edges that fold under. So we have an edge here that folds under, and we have an edge here that folds under. So each pleat is like its own separate little box, and that goes around. So I have examples as well of use of box pleats in cosplay or in characters. So if any of you have seen Sound Euphonium or Hideki Euphonium, you'd recognize that box pleat from Runimiko Omai's outfit. But most pleats that you see, or it's called the knife pleat, where it's just a continuous over and under. So there's only one underside on the pleat. There's just like that. And then examples of this would be, again, Junko and Shima from Danganronpa, pretty much any Danganronpa character, the Persona 5 girls. So making a pleated skirt unfortunately takes some math. Yeah, I know, I was disappointed when I had to make mine. So what we're going to do is we're going to need two measurements. We're going to need a measurement from the area around where you want the skirt to fit, and then a measurement for how long you want the skirt. So I already measured all this. Oopsies, my earring fell out. Sorry, technical difficulties. But I already took the measurements for the area around where I want the skirt to fall and how long I want it. So the circumference of the skirt, come on, there we go, I want is going to be, you will not be able to see this. There we go. Is going to be 31 inches. So I'm going to want it 31 inches around. And then one thing that we need to keep in mind is when we pleat the fabric, we're going to make it smaller. So I have a little bit of an example of, or a visual of how this pleated skirt is going to work. So we have a pleat here, a pleat here, pleat here, pleat here. So these are all the same size. So we're going to take pleat 1, and then we're going to fold it into pleat 2. And then we have pleat 2, and then we're going to fold it into pleat 3. And then so on and so forth until you're done. And so we have a pleat here, then in here we have half a pleat and half a pleat, so that makes a second pleat. So for every one pleat, we're going to need twice the amount of fabric, because we have 2 pleats, if that makes sense. You're going to need twice the amount of width that you measured the area around. So in this instance, I measured 31 inches around, and then I want twice that amount of fabric. So that's going to be 62 inches long. And then we need to think about what's called the seam allowance. So the seam allowance is, here's awkward talking like this. The seam allowance is the difference between where the fabric ends and where the seam is. So I actually can show you on an unfinished piece of fabric. The hood and the shirt are attached. This is the edge of the fabric, and then this line right here is the seam. So the area between the seam and the end of the fabric is called the seam allowance. So if when you're making patterns or clothes and it's always, always, always too small, you might be forgetting about the seam allowance. We've all done it. We've all done it. So we're going to have to add an extra ½ inch on either side. So that means we're going to add an extra inch total. So we have 62, and then we're going to add 1. So it's going to be 63 inches total. So our skirt's going to be 63 inches long. And then for fun, we'll say that we want it to be 16 inches long. And then again, we're gonna wanna add some seam allowance for the top on the waistband and the bottom for the hem. So we're gonna, again, add an extra 1 inch. So 16 plus 1 inch equals 17 inches. So we're going to need a rectangle that is 63 inches by 17 inches, just like that. And then one thing to keep in mind when you're making the pleats, if you're making a knife pleat and you're making the pleat bigger than 1 inch, you're going to want to watch this measurement right here. So let's say this measurement, so my final measurement is 63, or technically 62. But let's say that my final measurement for here, well, I guess it wouldn't be even, but let's say it's like 1.5. You want to make sure that you can fit the number of pleats evenly into this number right here, the 62. So I'm just going to be making, I believe, 2-inch pleats. So that fits into 62 perfectly. So we don't need to worry about that. But if you're making an uneven pleat width like 1.5 or 1.25 for whatever reason, that's just something to keep in mind. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the waistband. So first you want to figure out how wide you want the waistband to be. Do you want it 1 inch? You want a 1/2 inch? You want 1.5 inches? So let's say we want a waistband that's 1.5 inches. So we're going to need a front of the waistband, and then we're going to want to fold it over. So we'll need a back of the waistband. And we'll need both of those sides to be 1.5 inches. So 1.5 times 2 is 3 inches. So far our waistband is 3 inches. And then we can't forget about seam allowance. So we're going to have to add an extra 1/2 inch on either side. So we have 0.5 times 2 equals 1 inch. So 3 inches plus 1 inch equals 4 inches. So our waistband is going to be 4 inches up and down. And then the circumference is going to be this first number we measured right here, this 31. So our waistband is going to be 4 inches by 31 inches. And so I have prepared ahead of time for the first time in my life, JK, and I have the pieces already set out. Yeah, let me put on the green fabric real quick so you can actually see what's going on. And good gravy, this coloration is not great. All right, so let's set this down. You can see that I already marked out the pleats here. Let's go this way. All right. So then what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top of the fabric and just fold over. And then you can hold the pleat in place with a pin. I've already pressed it, so I technically don't need to worry about it, but it's just a good habit to be into. And then you're just going to keep folding over until you are finished with pleating the fabric. And again, this is going to take a little bit of time, so if we have any questions or need for clarification, go ahead and comment, and I'll try and keep an eye out. In the meantime, how is everybody's conventions going? Having a lot of fun? Fun talking to myself. All right. 15, 10. All right, and then for the sake of expediency, let's just go fast. And then with these pleated skirts, you have a couple options on ways to close it. You can use a regular average zipper with using one of the three methods we talked about. You can close with an invisible zipper using the method we talked about, or you can actually close with an elastic waistband. The elastic waistband will be a bit more difficult to make, but it's certainly possible. All right, so now we are all pleated up. And then among ways to close with a zipper, you have two methods of closing the waistband as well. So with the skirt I made here, you can see that the invisible zipper goes all the way into the waistband. However, on this Amazon skirt, you can see the zipper only goes to the skirt, and then it closes with a button, just like, come on, like that. And so I'm going to show you the method of the button closure because that's a little bit more complicated. So when we're making a waistband with a button closure, we're actually going to add another inch or two at the very end of the waistband. So this is my waistband, and so I added an extra little bit here, and this is what's going to fold over. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the right side of the skirt fabric and the right side of the waistband fabric. And so what I would suggest is sewing the zipper in first. However, I don't have any extra zippers to spare, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to sew the waistband right onto the skirt. All right, and we're just gonna go for a ride. This is the part where I tell you you're not supposed to sew over pins. It's bad for your machine. That being said, I still do it. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, it was funky there. All right. Home stretch, guys. All right, so we have successfully sewn the waistband to the skirt. And then what we're going to do is we are going to, let me just slide this over so you can see. We're going to fold the waistband in half, this extra bit in half like this. And we're going to use what's called I believe it's the taco method or the burrito method, where we are going to pin it closed just like that. So you'll notice that we do have a little bit of the skirt inside there. And this will just help make the part that's folded over look nice and clean, nice and neat. So we're just going to pin that real quick. And just like that. All right, and then we're just going to sew this. All right. And so now we have a stitch along here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to push it right sides out. So now we have a waistband. The edge looks like this. Where's the other side? Just like this. And then we can use that fold to follow to the very end and fold all this under, pretending we don't have pins in there because I'm too lazy to take them out. All right, and that is how you would attach the waistband. And then you would, just the same way that I showed with buttonholes, is you want the buttonhole to be on this extra bit of fabric here. And then the button on the side right over here. So the button would be probably about right here. And then you would fold it around and cinch it just like that. So that is how you would make a pleated skirt. Except, you know, never actually make it. All right, so that is that. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about making pleated skirts? All right, so then let's move on to, is my thing go? Oopsies, boot covers. The bane of my existence, JK. So boot covers are a method of making a character's shoes or boots that might not exist in real life. So Hawkeye from Avengers vs. Mightiest Heroes, Aang from Avatar, The Last Airbender, or I guess from Persona 3. So for this, you'll need a stretchy fabric like spandex or lycra or just a regular knit. And you need a base shoe. So for example, for my I guess cosplay, I'm going to be using these shoes. And yes, they are very tall, and yes, I'm going to suffer. You'd also need some paper to trace with. I use some leftover wrapping paper. You can use butcher paper. You can use fabric. You can use newspaper, just whatever you have lying around. That'll make it easy. Excuse me. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put the shoe on. And I'm going to kind of demonstrate it here. I believe that's the wrong foot. Yes, that's the wrong foot. Oof. This cosplay is not the easiest to move around in. So you're going to put the shoe on, and then you're going to lay down whatever you're using to trace on, and just trace around your leg. And it's not going to be super accurate. So I already did it, and I came out with this pattern. So the inner line is my first trace job. And then what I did is I held the pattern up to my calf and tried to find the halfway point there around my calf. And that is the second line right here, all the way around. And then I added an extra ½ inch of that from seam allowance. And that did not turn out perfectly. So let me show you, this is what I made it out of. This is the pattern out of just the same green fabric that you've seen me using. And so you're just going to stick the fabric on like this. I'm keeping the seam spacing out so it's easy to adjust the size. But if you see right away, this does not fit very well. There's this extra room here. There's this extra stuff. And then if I put it on, you would see that it's very much loose. And so what you're going to do is just a bit of trial and error to put it on. Let me show you. Oofta. Put it on and adjust the size. We got a lot of extra room here because this is, there we go. We got room here, and we're just going to keep taking this in. I'm using pins to adjust the size. And then when you're doing this, make sure that you do secure the ends of your boot cover down when you're making the cover, because otherwise things pull out of place, and it's not always, and then things turn out wrong. And if you do everything correctly, you'll come out with a boot cover looking like this. Let me go ahead. Oof, something pulled in my costume. Have a boot cover like, let me just get up on my table real quick to show. Just like this. And one thing I would say advise, but is basically mandatory when you're having boot covers, especially for a high heel boot cover. This is currently being held with tape because this is temporary. But when you make your final product and you glue the edges down with like E6000, buy heel grips. Buy them. You can Amazon, Target, Walmart. They will save your ankles, because what heel grips are is you can glue them to the base of your shoe and they are just grippy. So that way when you're walking around, you're not walking on fabric, you're walking on grip. And safety is key when you're in cosplay. Do not break your ankles to wear cool shoes. Please save your ankles. All right. Yeah, so once you have the pattern, and it's mostly just working with it. Again, I suggest we're starting large and going small. So you'll notice that this pattern, or this boot, is much bigger and bulkier, and that makes it really easy to take the little bits in. So if you do have like stretchy fabric that you're not using, I highly suggest using that to start with, just to pattern it out just in case. So then, yeah, I have my, shoot, I'm missing my words. I have my boot cover pattern right here, so, and that's all ready to go. All right, so we are doing well with time. So now we're going to be talking about the love of my life, my reason for living, fabric. So we're going to be talking about how to choose fabric for a costume. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the methods of classification for fabrics. So you can classify fabric by weight, by fiber, or by the drape. Both weight and fiber are technical terms that almost every fabric store will explain. They'll explain if their fabric is medium weight, natural fiber, cotton fiber. Some of them will talk about drape, but not all of them. There's no technical term for it. So we're going to focus mostly on using the weight and fiber to determine what fabrics to use. So a lightweight fabric, those would be your chiffons, your crepes, organdy, cotton lawn, even things like tulle and lace. So for example, with Elsa, her sheer little capelet thing, I would use like a chiffon for that, or an organza. With this guy, I know his name. He's from a show called The Untamed, but I forget his name. But if you watch the show, all of their clothes are very flowy in the wind. They're very light and airy. So if you want to cosplay from the show, I would suggest a lighter weight fabric, like a silk, Meanwhile, we have this tutu from Princess Tutu. This is an example of a lightweight fabric that isn't soft and flowing. Tutus are made out of tulle, which is this very stiff, lightweight fabric, but it's breathable. So I do have a couple of examples. I have some lace right here. You can see that it's very light and airy. And again, right here, it's not very drapey, so you can't really tell. But this is more of a light skirt. Similarly, we have this Princess Perfuma. This is very obviously lightweight. It's see-through, it's sheer, and it moves very, very easy with the air. This is what is called organza, and it's a sheer type of fabric. And the one thing to note is there is no one classification for what makes a lightweight fabric and what makes a medium weight or a heavyweight fabric. There's technical weights, but a lot of people don't go by those technical weights. They instead go by the feel, which can be a little bit annoying. So for example, someone might say that this shirt fabric is a medium weight fabric because it does have a little bit of heft to it, but it's also very light and almost sheer. So I would consider it a lightweight, but it's again a bit more of personal view of whether something's light or medium weight. Moving on to medium weight. Medium weight fabrics include cotton sateen, which is actually what this shirt is made out of. This is made out of a white cotton sateen fabric. There's also what's called an Oxford. Velvet can be medium weight, but it can also be heavyweight. It does depend on how thick the velvet is. And then there's taffeta and charmeuse, which are both kind of like prom dress materials. So, for example, we have Farid from Moai and Osiris. His outfit is very much mobile, so it's like a uniform, so it wouldn't be very light, but it's also not holding itself like a uniform fabric, like a poplin or a twill. So I would consider this a medium weight fabric, like a sateen or maybe even a satin. Meanwhile, we have Eret's red dress here. This is definitely a taffeta or a sateen kind of fabric. You can't really see, it's not very high quality, but her dresses are very much like a prom dress kind of looking thing. And then we have the infamous pink dress from Black Butler. This again would be more of a sateen or a taffeta, or if you're feeling fancy, you can make it out of charmeuse. Another example I have of a medium weight fabric is my red Lizzie dress. You can see how the way the skirt moves, that there's definitely some heft to it. So so this is the way the organza moves, very light and airy. This is the way the medium weight fabric, there's more heft to it, there's less flow to it. And you can see it a bit more obviously in the shrug piece in the sleeves. So if you watch the way when you move the sleeves, it has a bit more structure to it. And then finally, we have our more heavyweight fabrics. So these would include things like leather or pleather, upholstery fabric, denim, or brocade. And if you don't know what brocade, it is that sort of fake Chinese-y kind of feeling fabric that you see at these fabric stores. So for examples of characters that look like they're wearing heavyweight fabrics, Strength from Black Rock Shooter looks like she's wearing some sort of like a pleather dress, though you can see that as more of a medium weight dress. It's up to you. And then we have Arden Azunia from Final Fantasy 15, who has this big fancy wool looking coat, all these layers. He is definitely wearing some heavyweight fabrics out in the heat. And one thing to note, that even though I did give examples of the different types of heavy, medium, lightweight fabrics, there do exist, for existence, some denims that are lightweight, or some cotton satines or velvets that are heavyweight. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you are choosing your fabric, is that the weight might play a role, but it's not necessarily, or certain fabrics might tend to be heavy, medium, or lightweight, but that doesn't mean that all fabrics are like that. Moving on to fiber content. First, we're starting with natural fiber fabrics. So these are definite. There's no middle ground. If it's 100% cotton, it's natural. If it's 100% wool, natural. Linen, silk. Modern velvets and velveteens are sometimes made synthetically, sometimes naturally. If it's a cheap velvet, it's probably synthetic. So examples would be Anna and Elsa's outfits from Frozen 2, Miroku from Inuyasha. He doesn't look like he has natural fibers, but he lives in the feudal era of Japan, so they don't have plastic there. So he would definitely have very simple natural fibers. Same with Not from Critical Role. They live in a fantasy world that barely have guns, so they don't really have plastic. So she would wear some very natural clothing. So the pros to using natural cotton fibers or natural fibers is with what's called the breathability. So we're all experts about breathability with cotton fabric with the face masks. That's why using polyester isn't as good, is because, there we go. Polyester is plastic, so it's like covering your mouth with plastic, which theoretically covers the droplets from getting out, but will make you unable to breathe. And it's the same way with just regular fabric. It's this breathability is a godsend in convention centers. If anybody has worn a bodysuit to a convention, like Diva or Seamus, the girl from I don't know, but just like the full bodysuit, then you know that stuff gets hot very easily. And that's because it's polyester and it doesn't breathe. So natural fibers do breathe a lot more easily, and they're a good choice if your character has a lot of layers. Another reason why it's good is if you have structured pieces, again, like this bodice, it's covered with It's covered with a knit, but the base of it, I use what's called an interlining. And heck, I'll get into that right now. If you have a fabric that's the perfect color, but it's too lightweight, it's too drapey for what you need, then you can use a tactic called interlining. So what you'll need is let's say you want a thick fabric that's the weight and the density and the drape that you want. And then you want the lighter fabric that is the color that you want. And you just put one on top of the other, just like that. And then you would cut out your pattern piece. And so then when you cut your pattern piece, you sew it together just like the pieces one on top of the other. And so what this does is it gives you the structure of the bottom piece with the color of the top piece. So I actually have a real life example with my Academy Diva blazer. I thought this blue was perfect, but this blue was a very lightweight, almost sheer cotton broadcloth. But you can tell the way it's moving that it definitely has a heavier weight fabric in there. And so what I did is I used a heavier weight gray wool. And so you can kind of see that I can separate the front and back. And if you look in the buttonholes, you see the evidence of that gray fabric right in there. So Interlining is a great way to get the structure you want, even if you can't find in the perfect color. If you find the perfect weight and drape of one fabric, then you can cover that with another fabric. And that can be really useful when making garments like a blazer or a dress or a skirt. Yeah, I went off on a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, so the reasons to use natural fiber are because of the breathability, or because if you're having a structured garment, or if you're into period pieces, historical costuming, natural fibers didn't exist, or polyester fabrics didn't exist until very recently. So if you want to be historically accurate, you want to go with the more natural fibers. And they also hold, pardon me, I've been talking a lot. They also hold the structure very well. So if you have pleats, like a skirt or darts, in like a top, that is something that natural fibers hold very easily. So this diva skirt right here is made out of cotton sateen. It's 100% cotton and natural, so it holds these pleats very well. Something like this, my Persona 5 outfit, this would not hold pleats very well because this is, I think, 80% polyester and only 20% cotton. So it is very, maybe it's even 100% polyester, I'm not sure. But it's very high polyester content. So it will not hold the pleats or darts well at all. Moving on, or before we move on, oh yeah, reasons not to use natural fibers is, especially if you're going with wool or silk or velvet, it can get very expensive very quickly. And so it can be almost prohibitively so that you're unable to afford it. Some wools can go up to 40, 50 bucks a yard, especially the really nice quality ones. So that can be a bit of a bummer. And real quick, speaking of Frozen 2, the natural fibers. I noticed when I was watching it that you can tell, I know it's not technically that impressive to show fibers on animated clothing, but it's still, you can tell what fabrics they're using in these. Like this is silk with an organza overlay. This is velvet, and you can tell that this is linen. It's just, I appreciate it. I like fabric. All right, moving on. Tangent aside. Synthetic fibers. So this is your polyester, your lycra, spandex, nylon, rayon, acrylic, and acetate. So 90% of synthetic fabrics you can use for like Widowmaker, Ladybug, Cammy, I believe her name is. I just put her in because my friend likes Street Fighter. 99% of these fabrics do stretch. However, acetate and acrylic are used as lining. So if you see right here, this shiny fabric is acetate or acrylic. So for example, I use it in my Academy Diva. This shiny stuff is very smooth. And so this is used as a lining to keep the fabric from bunching up. This is acetate. And then in my Vampire Todoroki, the inside of this right here is acetate as well. But again, 99% of the fabric of the synthetic fibers like polyester, lycra, spandex are all known for their stretchiness. The reasons you would want a synthetic fabric is because it stretches around like a boss. So if you have, again, a bodysuit like Black Widow or Marinette, or my wings, annoying. Or gosh, who else has body? There's a lot of bodysuits. But if you have somebody that needs a lot of stretch, Persona 5 character, then it's useful for that because very few natural fibers stretch at all. And those that do stretch only stretch a little bit and across the bias, which is the sideways. So if you want stretch, you need at least some polyester. One other good thing about polyester is, or I should say synthetics. I say polyester as a overarching thing, but it's really synthetic. The thing about synthetic is that, especially again with these cartoony bodysuits, it's hard to get these looks with natural fibers because you will see the grain on these natural fibers. Whereas with synthetics, there's not really an obvious grain most of the time. So that can be really useful if you really want to mimic a cartoony look. And also, it can be very forgiving in terms of size. If you have a very structured cotton garment, then it's very hard for you and your friend who's a size up from you or a size down from you to wear the same thing. Whereas if it's a spandex bodysuit, then two differently sized people can probably fit into it depending on both their sizes. Some reasons not to use synthetic fabrics, again, is breathability. Imagine covering yourself in plastic wrap entirely. And that is what wearing polyester is basically like. So you can get very sweaty in a hot convention center. It can be a nightmare. So if you do use polyester, for the love of everybody around you, bring deodorant. I speak from experience, please. Synthetic fabrics can also be very hard to work with because they slip and slide a lot, especially with the lining fabrics like the acetate and acrylic. If you're not careful, the pattern pieces can slide out from one another and leave you with jagged edges, and it looks kind of ew. And if you need to dye the polyester fabric, goodness help you. You need to continually boil water and then put the fabric in and continue boiling and just stirring it around like you're making the world's most disgusting soup. And then it's not always that even, it's not always the colors you want. It can be a bit of a challenge to dye synthetic fibers. And the last reason is that high quality synthetic fabrics can be just as expensive as high quality natural fibers. So if anybody has been to a Joann's recently and seen Yaya Han's collection, I love her, you can see that some of her fabrics are easily, I think the cheapest is like $15. The rest are 20 to 40. Can go up from there. I haven't checked recently, but they can be very expensive. So also prohibitively expensive for those that don't have a lot of money. Finally, we have the piece de resistance of fiber content, the beautiful blended fabric. I was going to show you examples, and this is some again more natural fabric. This is a cotton broadcloth, and this stuff is linen. It's kind of gross. This is my Ren Fair costume, all folded up. Back when we had Ren Fairs, I'm not bitter. Anyway, blended fabrics, back on blended fabrics. So blended fabrics, most knits that you see in like Joann's are blended. That means they have both natural and synthetic. Commonly, it's cotton and polyester or cotton poly blends. There's also wool and polyester. Using a wool poly blend tends to make wool more affordable. So let's say, hypothetically, like me, you're planning on making a Molly Mock's red coat. For those of you who know what Molly Mock's coat looks like, it is a big red fancy cloak that is a bunch of embroidery, but you'd need 5 to 7 yards of it, of wool for it. So if the red wool costs $40 a yard, you need a lot of money. However, a cheaper wool poly blend would be cheaper and make it much more affordable to make a coat like that. So some reasons to use blended fabric. It's more breathable than polyester and more affordable than cotton fabrics. It's really easy to find a lot of knits at basic fabric stores. Joann's has a whole bunch of them with different cotton to polyester ratios that you can find pretty much whatever you need. And just like synthetic fabrics, they are easy to work with, or easier to work with. And can be very forgiving to size. Some reasons not to use it is that it can be, even though it's better than cotton at some things and better than synthetic at some things, it's middle ground. It's not great at any one thing, so it's less breathable than cotton, and it doesn't look very natural most of the time. And again, it can be tough to dye because you can't use cotton dye on a blended fabric, because what that would do is it would only dye the cotton part of your fabric, and it looked very splotchy and weird and wrong. So you'd need to use polyester dye. So you need to do the cooking. And so for blended fabrics, my favorite blended knit is this Pont Roma. It's so classic Pont Roma knit. An example of this would be my Lizzie dress. This is made out of red Pont fabric, a Pont Roma fabric. And the reason I like this is, first, it's only like $13 a yard on full price. You can usually get it half off if you're patient, 60% off if you're really patient. And it has like a really good drape. It has a really good feel. It's not super, it's breathable. I can function in it. Some other examples of blended fabrics. These are two different things I made. They're both blended knit. All right. And then finally, drape. So we are perfectly on track. So first, talking about smooth drape. So again, these are not technical terms. The best way to figure out if a fabric has drape is looking at the reviews. So for example, I'm making Eret's pink dress, her base dress, and I wanted to find a fabric that was drapey, but still sturdy. And so I found a few that could work, and then I read the reviews and found there's this one fabric that everybody said was a medium weight drapey fabric, which was exactly what I wanted. So for examples of drapey fabrics you can use in costume is Mercy's Winged Victory from the game Overwatch. It's inspired pretty obviously by Grecian clothing, which is famously very loose and drapey. We have, again, I chose his winter outfit so I could show you that this is obviously a heavier weight fabric, but it's still very drapey based on the point his sleeves come to. And then we have Morgana from the BBC's Merlin with her fancy, beautiful, gorgeous dress. I love her dresses so much. And then another lightweight drapey fabric is Rey from The Force Awakens, Star Wars, not Star Trek. I promise I know the difference. And then finally we have stiff draped fabrics. So again, this is a personal view. Some people might think, oh no, that's a drapey fabric. Some people might think it's structured. But for example, we have the Garrison uniform from Voltron, and you can tell it's a stiffer fabric by the way the cuff hangs off of his wrist. You can see there's space on both sides. That means it has its own structure. It's not hanging off of him. It's structured around him. Same with Todoroki's hero uniform. You can see especially around the neck, that high neck is very structured. And so that is all I had about fabrics. That's all I had. We went from head, we went to toe, we talked about fabrics. That is all I have. We still have 10 minutes. So, questions? Any questions at all? Can be about, doesn't have to be about anything I talked about here. It can be about general cosplay tips and tricks. It can be about experiences cosplaying, whatever you're feeling. Me about my sewing room setup. I love it so much. It's a basement, but it's for sewing.
Was your mom a sewer or like a designer?
Yeah. So both my grandma and my mom were both avid sewers, so this is technically my mom's sewing room. She just allows me to use it. So she has all the fancy machines. She has all the tips and tricks. But I actually, when I started cosplaying, she was very wary because to that point I'd been relying on her to sew everything. So I'd be like, hey mom, can you send me this? Hey mom, can you send me this? So when I said, hey mom, I'm interested in cosplay, she thought that meant that I was asking her to sew my stuff. So that led me to try and learn to sew on my own. And so I'm basically self-taught, but I do ask my mom when I have specific questions. We're going off. Okay, so I see you, Erica. Laura did ask first. So my favorite cosplay that I've done, oh boy, probably Jester. So this is just for those of you that don't know, this is Jester from Critical Role. I actually have, you can't see it, but I have a tail. Yeah, so I started doing Jester because my friend wanted to do Molly Mock. And so I started designing the costume. And then I thought, hey, why don't we go to Ren Fair together? We can both be characters from this podcast. And so I decided to be Jester. And so I started, while working on Jester's costume, I started listening to the podcast and I have become obsessed. So probably Jester. Second from that, I don't have his cosplay here, but Prompto from Final Fantasy 15 because I love that man. And then Erica, for good first cosplays, I think like common cosplays you can buy online, like from My Hero Academia, there's a whole bunch of things you can buy on Amazon, simple cosplays that you can thrift. For example, this vest is for Akihiko from Persona 3. You can thrift a vest, and the rest of his outfit is just black pants, a white button-up shirt, and it's a simple gray wig. Others would be, again, Rey from The Force Awakens, or I guess Star Wars in general, would be easy. Leia from Star Wars would be a good simple one. Oh boy, let me go back through because now that you asked me this question, I've forgotten every single character that exists in the world. But yeah, my best advice is it's okay to buy cosplay. I don't really like this attitude of making your cosplay is the only way to go. Everybody buys cosplay. This is about cosplay. This is about cosplay. Like half of these are purchased. Doesn't make it wrong or right. It's just cosplay. Cosplay's for fun. So yeah, I would try to find a character that you can easily thrift. And casual cosplay is totally okay. If you just get like a character's wig and find clothes that really fit them, that's totally good. It's totally fun. Are there any other questions that I missed? Oh boy, my thinking went done. Oh boy, that really came undone. Whoopsie. All right. It looks like we are about set.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tess. This was so informative. Thank
you, everybody, for coming. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. All right. And the video will be available on our YouTube page. So if you want to reference back to it, or if somebody that you know missed it and they want to check it out, it'll be on our YouTube page very, very soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Bye.